Welcome to Exploring Boys Education, a regular podcast produced by the International Boys Schools Coalition, in which we have conversations about educating boys and the many issues that impact and affect boys' schools and teachers of boys. Exploring Boys Education is hosted by me, Bruce Collins. I am the IBSC's Director of Membership Engagement. In this episode of Exploring Boys Education, we'll be diving into what it means to embrace a culture of innovation and research in boys' schools. Dr. Caitlin Munday from the Scots College hosts two fascinating interviews with schools from the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom and Canada. Research should play an important role in every school, and as more schools start venturing into creating their own research centres, these conversations will be helpful to many.
Research helps us to better understand what we're doing, help us to make better choices and to give us confidence in terms of our professional development and professional growth.
Schools are busy places. Educators are very, very busy people. And so research, in order to really change culture, needs to be core to the mission of the school and core to the daily business.
It's been really exciting for us to have the opportunity to afford our teachers and our thoughts the ability to do what schools do for our students, which is think about learning.
But before we get into the conversations with Caitlin and her guests, I'd like to take a moment to say thank you for your support of this podcast. We've received numerous positive comments about the ways in which Exploring Boys Education is making a difference in boys' schools and for teachers of boys. In fact, I was blown away by the feedback we received recently in a voice note from Russell Leary, who is the History Department Chair at Blue Ridge School in Virginia in the United States. Russell shared how they are using the podcast to facilitate professional conversations.
At the Blue Ridge School, we've used the Exploring Boys Education podcast to reflect on our own practices and remind ourselves of what our boys truly need the most. It's exciting for us to hear the hopeful message regarding boys' education and has provided ideas on how to make ourselves and our school a better place to learn.
Now, isn't that a cool idea? We definitely love it, and we would like to see more of that happening with the podcast. We'd also like to engage more with you, our audience, so we have an idea, and that is to feature your feedback or responses to ideas shared here on future episodes of the podcast. You can do that easily by sending me a WhatsApp voice note. My number is +27 71 8911 898. Or alternatively, why not record a voice memo on your phone and email it to me on collins@theibsc.org. Remember to keep these short and also introduce yourself before you share your feedback. We're hoping that many of you will engage with us in this way and have your voices featured on future episodes. But now, back to today's focus on creating cultures of innovation and creativity in boys' schools. By way of introduction, I asked our guest host, Dr. Caitlin Munday, who is a research fellow at the Scots College in Sydney, to share her insights on the benefits of evidence-informed practice in schools.
Albert Einstein once quipped, "We cannot solve a problem by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created it." Research and innovation matter now more than ever. They matter because as we look at our boys, teachers, schools, educational systems, and society more broadly, we see complex challenges everywhere. And these challenges won't be solved by doing things the way they've always been done. That's why we need to deepen a culture of research, innovation, and hard thinking in schools. We want to more effectively understand and engage boys by asking and answering the right questions. We want to build the competence and passion of teachers and raise the profile of teaching as a scholarly vocation. We want to make better decisions about resources and planning from the micro level of the individual classroom to the macro level of public policy. It's an exciting moment in boys' schools to be thinking hard about the future of education. And through the leadership of the IBSC Research Committee and the energy of research engagement in schools around the world, We're seeing new and better ways of bringing out the best in boys and reinventing an education worth having into the future.
So without further ado, let's dive right into the interviews that were recorded in Montreal at the IBSC annual conference.
Well, my name is Dr. Caitlin Munday. I'm from the Scots College and I'm here with Mr. Tom Arbuthnott from Eton College, Dr. Kim Hudson from St Christopher's, Dr. Hugh Chilton from the Scots College and Dr. Ian Lambert from the Scots College, but also Chair of the IBSC Research Committee and the Australasian Vice President. There is increasing interest in research and innovation in schools. And Ian, I thought we might kick off with you. Why do you think that's the case? What is driving schools to invest in research?
I think schools are increasingly recognising that the world is getting more complex, the demands on schools are changing, and that while we've had a fairly conservative model of a school, we're recognising that we need to be setting visions and strategies, and we need to be thinking about which directions and which choices we make in terms of our resources, in terms of the people we engage in the life of the school, and the types of programs that we hope to engage the boys with. So a lot of the focus for us around research is that we often, as schools, are subjected to research that is done to us, or it's done by others about us, but we're really concerned, I think, about research that's done in the school or by the school, so that it's very relevant to practice, because ultimately the realisation of any vision of a school will only take place if the teachers and the staff in the school drive that vision and are aligned with that vision. And I think research helps us to better understand what we're doing, help us to make better choices, and to give us confidence in terms of our professional development and professional growth.
Kim, that doesn't seem like a straightforward thing. What are some of the current challenges associated with building research and innovation cultures in schools?
Absolutely, Caitlin. So to build off what Ian just talked about, we have sort of identified three major challenges in terms of building those cultures, which are so important. Ian touched on the first one already, the issue of research being done to schools rather than with schools and by schools, and that's why these cultures are so important. It has to be driven by the folks who live and breathe school life. Secondly, what we also know is it's not as though there's not research out there, but rather the issue is getting the research findings in the hands of people who can make the changes. So making the research findings accessible, and then helping our teachers access those such that they do change practice. A third challenge is that often research work is on top of everything else that's going on in schools. So schools are busy places. Educators are very, very busy people. And so research, in order to really change culture, needs to be core to the mission of the school and core to the daily business. So again, all those things are challenges, but not things that can't be overcome.
Well, given these challenges, how do we avoid research and innovation just becoming buzzwords of the hour with great promise but with momentary impact? What does genuine expertise look like, and how do we grow it in our schools? Hugh, perhaps you'd like to talk to us about that.
Yeah, sure. We as educators are often inflicted with a great series of fads and trends and so forth. And if you've been around for a little while, it can seem like research and innovation is just another thing. But I think if we have a kind of a richer and broader perspective on what we're trying to do in education, if we sort of turn the dial back to why were our schools started, what was their purpose and mission, have we lost in the bureaucratisation of education something of the way in which schools aren't just the kind of passive recipients of expert knowledge produced out there in the real world, quote unquote, but actually part of the conversation about what it means to live a good life and how to form human beings, and at the same time kind of look with more vision forwards at the kind of challenges coming down the pipeline towards schools, and think about how do we really help teachers to have the skills, yes, but also the sense of vocation, the expertise around connecting across the borders between schools, universities, and the world of work, such that they can really think critically about the project of education. So I think expertise looks like being able to look back with wisdom and look forward with the kind of vision that we need for the future.
All of you have been very involved, or your schools have been involved with the IBSC Research Committee. How has that committee sought to contribute to the building of these research and innovation cultures and networks? Ian, perhaps I'll throw to you for that one.
I think what's been emerging in the IBC over time is the fact that we're bringing together different communities from different cultural backgrounds, and there are lots of things that are similar, and there are things that are quite different in terms of the way we think about education. And so I think the research framework becomes really important in terms of the IBSC meeting the needs of its members. So understanding what our members need, understanding the feedback, linking the work of the research committee to that. So it builds on sort of 5 principles that underpin the work that we do on behalf of the schools, and that is that the research that we engage in must always be relevant. So whether that's at the level of action research, individual research, or sort of global research that impacts the whole community, it still must be very relevant for the organisation and relevant for individual member schools. It must always be rigorous, and it can't be superficial in any sense, and that means that it's research that's conducted over time. So there's continuity of engagement and thought in the process, that the research is helping us to stay on the front foot as an organisation. So it's innovative, it's thinking, it's looking at schools that are engaged in new practices, best practices, however you describe that, or good responses to challenges that are emerging in different settings. And then I think one of the key areas, the 4th area, is that research needs to be really embedded in our individual school communities and in our organisation, that all elements of what we're doing are shaped by the learning that is coming through the research project. And then also to think really hard about how we disseminate that knowledge. Too often, research is done, we have a final product, somebody out there reads it, and it goes on a shelf and it doesn't impact. So we want to look at the way in which we can actually break down, disseminate, communicate, so that any research that's done at any of those 3 levels will impact the school. So we do ask those questions about what gets researched, who does the research, and where does that research go, and they're very important issues for us.
And very significant questions. You mentioned, when going through those principles, research, and we've talked a lot about that, but that's a very broad and varied term. What type of research is the IBSC Research Committee interested in, the IBSC more broadly?
I think we've had, the IBSC was established in 1995, and particularly as it moved towards the 2000 and beyond, really developed a very strong action research program, and that program was really concerned with the needs of early career teachers and how they could develop reflective practice that was very much embedded in their own school community, but they would be able to collaborate with educators from around the world. And that program continues to be a great pillar or a great strength of research that's conducted. The other area that we've looked at larger scale continuous projects that have been involved over a number of years, engaging a number of schools and working with key universities or centres of learning or individuals who've developed a very rigorous ethical research project. And so that's a key part of the work we do. And the other area that's emerging is many teachers in our schools have undertaken postgraduate research as individuals, and we're really looking at how we can link those individuals together and draw that knowledge together for our mutual benefit as an organisation. So I think probably you think about sort of action research, individual researchers collaborating, and then large multi-year, probably university or institute guided research projects.
That's a lot of different kinds of research, and it's incredibly valuable to have the work of the committee facilitating those initiatives and drawing together those networks, growing expertise, and disseminating research amongst our network of boys' schools. Each of you represent schools that have been active in the research scene for a while and have sought to establish research centres of some kind, though the flavour and focus of those looks different. For schools who are persuaded of the value of growing research and innovation cultures and who are interested in building these cultures within their own context, how would you recommend they begin? And perhaps we can begin with you, Kim. Tell us what research looks like at St Christopher's and what has been working well, and what words of wisdom you can offer those who are wishing to begin this process.
Absolutely. So one of the things that has really helped our Center for the Study of Boys move forward is giving our teachers and our boys these communities of research. And so we're fortunate to have an action research team of faculty within the school. So at this point, 35% of our teachers have engaged in action research projects. And that is helpful on a number of levels. First of all, that action research is really personal to each teacher. So the teachers are engaged, they're invested, they have a question they want to investigate, and so they work with their boys, which is also a great model because the boys then see teacher as learner. They see their teachers asking questions, collecting data, asking new questions, and reflecting on what they find, which is really important for creating that community. It also builds a wonderful community across our school. So we are a JK through 12 school, and so teachers across divisions are working together and supporting one another through that process. Another important principle of our center is the engagement of our boys. So our goal always is to make sure that we are reaching our boys, that we are engaging them in what works best for them to move them forward in whatever domain it may be. And so a critical part of that process is engaging them and asking them what they're thinking. So at the heart of all that we do are the voices of our boys, and I feel like they guide us, and when we get off track, they help us get back on track with some pointed feedback. And so those two principles, that sort of community of research and including our boys in all that we do, are really central to the work of our center.
Tom, how has that looked, similar or different for the Tony Little Centre at Eton?
And I think I'd endorse everything Kim's just said about the initial journey of getting a research centre up and running. I think where we are now is on moving towards, while continuing to embed research, having the voices of boys, publishing research journals and so on, we're moving to the next stage, which is also engaging our local communities of schools in the value of evidence-based practice and research. It's very interesting. We're starting up a local partnership of 9 schools, 7 state-maintained schools, 2 independent schools. And one of the very first things that group put on the table that they want the group to look at is indeed research. And certainly we're looking at the IBSC model of action research for inspiration and ways to do that. So the Tony Little Centre is not just a hub inside Eton, it's also becoming a hub outside Eton. And that's becoming particularly important as well as we move to a culture where we are demanding really valid and powerful impact assessment of the different things we do. So taking that research model and actually applying it to, for example, the amount of money we spend on boys from more disadvantaged backgrounds who come to the school, and being able to come up with a really researched informed framework for how successful we're being. Those, I think, are the second or third order effects that we're beginning to experience now that the centre's established in the school.
What have been some of the challenges as you've gone about establishing those partnerships and moving the centre
forward?
Well, I think certainly in the UK, school partnerships is a really important discourse, it's a really important policy priority for the government to have independent schools and state-maintained schools working together. So 4 or 5 years ago, we founded a state-maintained boarding school called Hollyport College, which is 4 or 5 miles away, and it's fantastic, and Eton boys and Hollyport students interact in all sorts of different ways. But the question that the government asks us, particularly in terms of the expenditure of taxpayer money, is how is this partnership enriching the experience of students in both schools? They're not just asking it of us, they're asking us of other schools which have gone down similar paths. I have to say, so far, in the first 4 or 5 years, we've come up with some relatively kind of initial answers to that question, but we are still in the process of putting a serious framework in place. But I think in 2 or 3 years' time, we hope to be able to have that framework to say working in partnership is really powerful for students of all kinds, and this is the way in which you can measure it, and this is the way you can assess your success.
Thanks, Tom. Hugh, the Scots College Research Centre is now in its 8th year. What's been the process of building a research culture, and what have been the lessons that you've learned along the way?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's there are many different ways of approaching research in schools, and I think for us, as I said earlier, a key focus has been really making sure it's connected to who we are as a school. What's our vision of education? How do we see ourselves contributing to the broader discussion? What's the role of the teacher in this project of formation? And how do we reimagine what that looks like? So it's been really exciting to see staff of all sorts of persuasions in the school re-engage with their vision of education, and also see themselves not just as kind of technicians, as you were, and or as it were, and as people who are disconnected from what's going on in the real world, but instrumentally connected to it. I think a couple of programs that have been really exciting there have been our Master Teacher Fellowships, where we've seen teachers who've been in the classroom for a long time really reconceive of themselves as leaders in the community, publishing research, mentoring younger staff, engaging with communities beyond the school, and modelling for our staff the idea that you go on and continue learning all through your career. Another aspect of staff engagement which has been exciting has been seeing staff consider and take up higher degrees by research. We've concentrated our professional learning around a cohort-based model of staff development. So we've got at the moment 7 staff in our PhD cohort who are working on projects really connected to the strategy of the school, and it's been great to see them collaborate together, share research, speak inside and outside the school, and model, as Kim said before, for boys and for colleagues, the idea that this is an inspiring and sort of renewing thing to be involved in research. So I think seeing that grow, there's obviously always challenges, and research can often be, the time challenges are a big one, as Kim mentioned. But I think people are inspired by reconnecting with ideas, reconnecting with the purpose of education, and seeing better decisions and better questions asked at all levels of the organisation about who we are, what we're doing, and how we can do that more effectively.
So what words of wisdom would you offer those who are starting out in this journey? Yeah,
I think I'd say have a really robust discussion all through your organisation, and with your community about why you want to do this, about who your school seeks to serve, and the particular distinctives of the school. So for instance, at Scots we have a very strong focus on experiential learning. We have a 6-month program for our grade 9 boys where they live and learn in the Kangaroo Valley and engage in all sorts of adventure and so forth. So a big focus for our research is experiential learning, thinking about, well, if this is a distinctive, how do we make sure we do that really well? So think about that, and I think it's important to be really clear about the kind of structures that are going to support the reconceptualisation of the role of the teacher. So if it is just one more thing, or if it's an adjunct to the core business of the school, then I think it's always going to be just one more thing. But if this is sort of celebrated and supported as central to the vocation of teaching, then I think it's got a lot more chance of actually becoming embedded and enduring in the school.
Well, thanks to each of you. It's been a great opportunity to reflect on the reasons for building research and innovation cultures within schools and networks between schools, to consider how this work is supported by the IBSC Research Committee and how it's exemplified, I think, in the approaches of research centres like those at St Christopher's and Eton and the Scots College, whose stories provide us with some guidance for how to go about building those
those research and innovation cultures in your own context, in order that promise of research and innovation is actually eventualized in practice.
I'm sure you'll agree that our guests have all given us food for thought about establishing similar cultures in our own schools. Before we hear Caitlin's next conversation, which is with the team at Crescent School in Toronto, who are just starting their journey, I'd like to highlight IBSC's commitment to research. As Ian Lambert mentioned earlier in this episode, the IBSC Research Committee has and continues to spearhead a number of research initiatives. Apart from the successful IBSC Action Research Program, which you can hear about in episode 2 of Exploring Boys Education, many boy-focused research projects have been run under the auspices of IBSC. All of these reports are available to member schools in our member centre. We have research reports in Member Centre on character education, relational teaching, mastery practice in teaching boys, achievement in boys' schools, locating significance in the lives of boys, and there's also a global study of effective practices in teaching boys. Early in 2020, we'll also be releasing the report of a study into responsible sexual citizenship. If you don't currently have access to the IBSC Member Centre, please email us on ibsc@theibsc.org for more information. For now, however, back to Caitlin and her second pair of guests, Mike Fellon and Sandy Boyes from Crescent School in Toronto.
I'm here with Mr. Mike Fellon from the Crescent School and with Dr. Sandra Boyes. We've just spoken with a number of schools who have established research centres and cultures within their context. But at Crescent, you're at the start of that journey, and so we thought it might be helpful to hear something of how you arrived at that decision and what your experience has been since. So why a research centre?
Well, thanks, Caitlin, and we really appreciate you engaging with us. We're on an exciting journey, and I think one of the great opportunities that schools have to participate within the Boys Schools Coalition is to learn from one another. And we have been actively watching and listening and observing great schools around the world establish places of inquiry and research centers so as to support staff and teachers in thinking about how best to educate their boys. And as we went around the world, it was clear to us that we wanted to do something similar. And so schools like Scots College in Sydney and St. Christopher's in Richmond and Eton College in the United Kingdom were gracious enough to allow us to come into their school, show us around, and invite us into the journey that they've been on. And so we were really inspired by what we saw, how we saw the work being produced, and we wanted to try our hand at doing something similar.
It's been really exciting for us to have the opportunity to afford our teachers and our thoughts the ability to do what schools do for our students, which is think about learning and how we learn and how we can engage in that process, and to be able to learn from our international colleagues. And the heart of what a research center is, examining our practice to support boys in their learning, was incredibly exciting to us. And it was very clear when we were able to visit the other schools how these research centers are informing the practice, and also the ability to have a research culture at a school which probes amazing questions, which is really what learning is all about. We will have listeners who will be inspired by your story and by your journey. And it'd be great to hear of how you've taken an idea and turned it into practice. So what does that process look like?
Well, many ideas in schools start from an opportunity where you're looking at your future. And so about 5 years ago, the school thought critically about where we wanted to go, and it first began with an affirmation of our mission, which is Men of Character from Boys of Promise. And we felt that in order to fully achieve that vision moving forward, we needed to think more, especially about two drivers of that mission, which are people and place. And so many schools that we work with and we are in partnership with put a lot of resources behind the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure of their school, so as to make sure the best resources are in place for their staffs and boys and whatnot. But I think for us, more importantly, we felt that it was our people that needed our first attention, and so it began with our intent to clarify and imagine the knowledge, skills, and character strengths of our boys. And so we frame that in terms of the portrait of the graduate. What would be the key qualities and characteristics that our boys would need to be future ready? And so we did that work. And what came out of that work then was 3 guiding questions. Who am I? How do I lead? And what is my legacy? And that was a great moment for us, because then it asked us, caused us to ask, what then are the commensurate qualities in our staff that are required to build those qualities and dispositions in the boys? And so we went down the road then of trying to develop and align key competencies that our staff would then need. So in doing this deliberate planning around our strategic intent and to go deeper within the need to support our people, it became clear to us that professional learning was the way in to ensuring that we both found, retained, and grew the very best people we could to support our boys in their character development. Thus, the center. Thus, the need to position the center as a place where learning, research, inquiry, professional growth all could be housed and developed in a common location.
There's some exciting things that we feel we've been able to do, based on the information that we've received from the other schools. So one thing they said is you really need to have a very clear focus and a clear understanding and way to communicate who you are and what you're doing within the school. So we've called ourselves the Crescent Center for Boys Education, but it's about discovering how boys learn best. And it was also really important that we had defined our purpose for everyone. So we wanted to design a community of inquiry to inform our practice, and I think that was really important. And then all the also advice that we had that was so important was just to choose the things that you want to focus on. You can't focus on everything. So in companionship with who am I, how do I lead, and what is my legacy, our 3 areas of focus are character, of course, given our mission statement, well-being, and 3 pedagogies, which are active, experiential, and relational. So that is really going to help us as we go forward to galvanize energy and focus of our teachers and the whole community around where we're going to put our energy and focus in research. And that's something we've most definitely learned from our colleagues, and we're excited about having a really clean way to start the upcoming year.
Yeah. And so when you think about that upcoming year, what are some of the very practical things that you will be doing as you introduce this centre to the school?
Well, we're going to start with our entire community with actually one of the questions that Mike started with earlier, which is who am I? And that's going to be the focus for our very first year. So it's not only with the students, but it is with the entire staff of the school to examine who they are as individuals and how their work at Crescent School works with everybody in the community. So that's how we're going to start.
One of the things that we do each year is we ask the staff to individually set goals that are in line with the school goals, and over the past few years we felt the need to allow people the space to create a personal professional goal. And so, as Sandy suggested, the question that we're going to be leading with this coming year, who am I, will allow us to explore personal competencies tied to, emotional intelligence in particular. And so we're going to have everyone in the staff set a goal to further develop their own self-awareness. And we hope and trust that in doing so, that will allow them to enter more deeply into why they do, what they're called to do, what they do. And back to your point about the journey, Caitlin, it strikes me that schools of the future need to be great places to teach, but they need to be great places to learn too. And so it's really important to me that as we are endeavoring to support students, and in this case boys, to be ongoing, lifelong learners, so too do we need to be doing that work with our staff, who we know, oftentimes, teach by not teaching anything at all. And so the what they're teaching in this case is that they themselves are endeavoring to learn and grow and develop their craft alongside the very students that they're looking to support. So I think very practically for us, that's how we're starting. And as a head, I think it's really important sometimes to identify when to get out of the way. And unfortunately for me, I have Sandy to trust and lean on, and so it's a real opportunity just to, when you have the people and you have the strength and the capacity to conduct work in your school, it's really an amazing thing just to be able to ask, how can I help? How can I allow you to flourish in your professional work? So I don't think we would be doing any of this really outside of the strategy and the intent without knowing that we had people in place, capable people who care about the mission, care about our staff, care about our boys, to envision it and lead it into the future. So I'm really excited about supporting Sandy and her team as we begin next year.
And I should mention that Trish Sislak, who is well known to the IBSC community as an action research leader, is also a part of this team, an integral part of this team. And we're going to be working a lot with her and her knowledge of IBSC schools all over the world to continue to learn from the partnership. So although we are new in this venture, we feel very well supported and excited to be a part of this new research culture family.
Well, thank you both so much. It's exciting to hear about where you've begun and where you're going, and we look forward to seeing how that progresses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Such wonderful insight from Mike and Sandy here about the process they're going through to establish a research centre at Crescent. What struck me most is how the collegiality in the IBSC network helped make this a reality. It is these kinds of connections and learning opportunities that make IBSC membership so valuable. My sincere thanks to all our guests on this episode, and in particular Dr. Caitlin Munday, who worked so hard to plan and make this episode possible. Before we close out today, I'd like to remind you to send me your voice notes in response to this and other Exploring Boys Education podcasts. If you've forgotten the details of how to do so, you can find those in our episode notes. Lastly, we'd like to encourage all our member schools to make sure that every member of staff at their schools is registered on Member Centre. This is one important way to leverage IBSC membership for the professional growth of faculty. The more of your teachers who can take advantage of our resources, the better. If you need help doing this, please reach out to us. Until our next Exploring Boys Education episode, from me, Bruce Collins, goodbye.